Hi, my name is Andrew Dudley and this is AF Live, a webcast featuring interviews of people working on the front lines of conservation. Today we're joined by a conservation hero, Etelle Higonnet, who's in Paros in Greece. How you doing, Etelle?
I'm great. It's lovely to be here with you.
Thanks for joining us. So, Etelle, what is it that you do?
My job is to try to stop deforestation, try to save forests from being destroyed for agriculture, things like cocoa and beef and palm oil. And I try to hold big behemoth companies accountable and make them toe the line.
Excellent. Sounds like a very challenging job. And you do this with Mighty Earth. Could you tell us a little bit more about those guys?
Yes, I work with Mighty Earth. It's a wonderful young organization. We're just 4 years old. And already in 4 years, we've been able to have some huge impact, turning around some of the biggest agribusiness companies that are trashing the world's forests. And Mighty Earth works a lot on palm oil, on beef, on soy, on cocoa.
And I've got to ask you, how did you get into this?
You know, it's a strange and long story. I started out the first 12 and a half years of my life as a human rights activist and investigator. I worked for places like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, and I worked in 2 war crimes tribunals. But it was very grim after a while because my focus was on war crimes and crimes against humanity in war zones and post-conflict areas like Iraq and Sierra Leone. So there was this moment when I thought, oh my goodness, what am I going to do with my life? I can't do any more of these interviews with rape survivors and go into prisons. And so I had a kind of come to Jesus moment and thought, well, the other thing I really, really, really care about is trying to save our planet and stop climate change. So I switched over and went to Greenpeace, and the rest is history. I became a passionate activist for forests and for the planet.
And at what age did you realize that you were going to start to go down this route? How young were you?
I was basically a toddler. I stomped into my parents' living room and said that I wanted to be a doctor without borders. And they were like, what? How did you come up with that? But no, starting at a very young age, I sort of was filled with this burning sense of injustice when I saw people being abused and rights being violated. And funnily enough, I actually think that, environmental work is often totally intertwined with human rights work because, we sort of imagine that human beings are special and different, but actually we're totally interconnected with all other species and with the planet that we live on.
So I watched the documentary on Netflix called Rotten: The Dark Side of Chocolate. And obviously, you're a key part in that. So how did that documentary come about?
Oh, it was very fun and exciting. I had been launching the Mighty Earth campaign to stop deforestation in cocoa. And we had done satellite mapping and undercover investigation and report and media work. And so I guess it was kind of in the news. And the folks from Netflix, from Rotten, reached out and said they were interested in cocoa. Whereupon I did a little dance of happiness that maybe we'd have some real allies in Netflix. And sure enough, we worked to give them all of our contacts, all of our ideas, all of our maps, all of our information, our intel, and tried to help in every way we could. And they did a beautiful job. They really, in their film, I think, were able to clearly, in a heartfelt, passionate, powerful way, explain how the chocolate industry is both destroying forests and destroying the lives of countless children who work in hazardous conditions and of a lot of the farmers who are essentially in modern slavery. And Rotten just brought it all together in this beautiful, powerful piece. I was so proud and honored to be a part of it, actually.
Yeah, it was really, really shocking. The thing that really stuck out for me was the tonnage price of cacao since 1970. I believe it was $5,700 a ton. And in 2016, 2017, that had come down to $1,900. So what has happened? How come the price has come down so much and put these farmers into poverty?
Andrew, it's poverty so dire that in a way I think it's very much akin to modern slavery. You know, I've never heard someone explain to me clearly and convincingly why earning less than $1 a day is not really akin to modern slavery. If you told me I was going to earn less than $1 a day for the rest of my life, I would feel that you had essentially enslaved me. So I think the poverty is very dire. And there are a number of reasons why it has worked out this way. I mean, one reason is corporate greed. It's a $100 billion a year industry. It's amazing to me that with that much money, with an industry awash in cash, in earnings, in income and benefits, that we are not seeing some of that trickle down better to the people who are doing the backbreaking labor in very hot sun and tough conditions, malaria, you name it. So I think part of it is corporate greed. Part of it is this deregulatory agenda that was pushed during the Reagan-Thatcher years that transformed a lot of the sort of bedrock of regulatory capabilities of cocoa. Some of it is the, I would say, kind of crazy speculatory, predatory behavior of the cocoa exchange. It's kind of like the stock exchange. There's these places where cocoa gets traded on the world market, and there is no threshold under which the price cannot fall. None. It's just this wild predatory speculation. I believe that as a moral matter, there must be a minimum price. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so what you see is that a couple generations ago, a cocoa farmer could send their kid to college even, and, you know, have a small home, buy clothes for the family. And now, I mean, people are living in rags, in shacks. I worked in Sierra Leone during the war. I've never seen such poverty as I did when the price really fell through the floor in cocoa and I went out to visit some rural communities.
Is it true as well that it said in the documentary that the Ghanaian government, they came together and created Cocoa Pec and then tried to ask for a minimum threshold of $2,600 a ton, and that was rejected by the chocolate industry?
So the chocolate industry ended up more or less accepting this minimum price that the Ghanaians and the Ivorians came together to create. I think it's a great way to think of it. You know, there's OPEC for oil, and now we have Cocoa Pec or something like it to kind of protect the price of cocoa. What's very sad and so disappointing is that other cocoa producing countries like Cameroon, Nigeria, Indonesia, Ecuador didn't also create minimum prices in their own country to protect their farmers from the vicissitudes of these market shocks. I think that's kind of shameful dereliction of duty from these other cocoa producing countries. And I will also say that, you know, the price that the Ivorian and the Ghanaian governments came up with is not really enough to guarantee a living income. It still falls short of a living income. So it is better than nothing, but it is not enough. The fact that the industry has accepted it just isn't going really far enough. It's better than nothing. It's a great first step, but it should be global and it should be more.
And in the 1990s, so Senator Harkin and Congressman Engle, they created the Harkin-Engle Protocol based on an expose by the BBC, I believe, that showed that there was up to 2 million children forced into servitude in the cacao industry. Has that changed in recent years? How has that improved, if any?
You know, what's amazing is that every 5 years after the Harkin-Engle Protocol was kicked into being, the industry has asked for a 5-year extension. So, you know, they promised to eradicate child labor in cocoa, and then 5 years in, they said, oh, my bad, we didn't do it. Can we have another 5 years? And then they just keep doing that over and over and over. So we've resulted in a situation where child labor in cocoa is still rampant, including really severe hazardous forms of child labor with harmful pesticides, machetes, sharp machetes, heavy loads. And that's just a sort of endemic, persistent problem that neither the industry nor the governments have really stepped up to eradicate. Nobody's given it their all. Part of the problem is that the industry and the governments cling to this culture of opacity. And it's only very recently with this Mighty Earth campaign that we've begun to force them to move into the world of traceability and transparency. If you don't know where your cocoa is from, how can you know if you have child labor in it or deforestation or anything else? Mm-hmm. So I think that you can say the Harkin-Engle Protocol has not been a success, In fact, tomorrow, Congressman Engel and former Senator Harkin are going to have a House Foreign Affairs congressional hearing about this. There's going to be a briefing, and I think it's a good chance for them to do some real soul searching. Why did they accept this voluntary commitments from the industry instead of going for something binding, something more robust and meaningful? And also, why only cocoa? What about all the destruction of indigenous lands that we see in beef and soy and in palm oil? What about the land grabbing that we see in rubber? How about the child labor in coffee? I think, the Harkin-Engle Protocol didn't go far enough in terms of covering more commodities, and it wasn't what we all hoped for.
So that's interesting. So let's talk a little bit then about the role of Mighty Earth in this. So you've got this, these governments are trying to push through this legislation and try and encourage change, but that's really not happened. So what have you guys tried to do? I know you've had the kind of Golden Egg Awards. You've tried to, really kind of direct attention on these companies' bad practices.
Well, we've done undercover investigations, satellite mapping, reports. We've worked with journalists. We've done a lot to rank and grade the companies in something that we call the Easter scorecard. It happens every year. All the companies get little eggs. You get an egg for your traceability, an egg for your child labor, an egg for your deforestation. It can be a good or a bad egg. And then it combines to a bunny score. And everybody gets a bunny score. And the worst of all the companies gets the Rotten Egg Award of the year. And the best company gets the Golden Egg Award. You can think of it as the thank and spank methodology. But, I feel like the ranking has been really helpful in terms of moving some of the worst actors to improve their policy and their practice. And to sort of create a race to the top for the best actors who want to get that golden egg and want to get that recognition that they're the industry leaders. But we've also tried protests, we've tried shareholder resolutions, we've tried petitions. In the last 3 years, there's been well over 1 million people signed petitions for sustainable cocoa, and in the 17 years prior, there was only just over 1 million. So I think we've stepped up awareness in consumers and engagement in consumers. And that's a kind of signal marker.
Fantastic. And what's been the role of the World Cacao Foundation? I understand that the chocolate industry kind of came together and created that organization. How have you found their response to the situation?
So the World Cacao Foundation is an industry lobby organization, essentially. I find that it has sometimes been a very helpful actor in terms of coordinating all the corporate players, kind of like herding cats, I guess you could say, and moving them along. And so in particular, the World Cacao Foundation has been very helpful in leading something called the Cocoa and Forest Initiative, which brought almost all the major chocolate and cocoa companies, traders and manufacturers, and which brought the governments of Ivory Coast, Ghana, and Colombia, and all signed these kind of public-private partnership agreements to end deforestation in cocoa and also eradicate other harms. But sometimes I see that the World Cacao Foundation doesn't go far enough. And so another example is part of the Cocoa and Forest Initiative promise was to create joint monitoring mechanisms. You can't hold anybody accountable if you're not watching, if you're not checking. Data is the key. You need data. Science is great. I love science. I also love Dr. Fauci and public health. And I think we're all getting a big dose of reality about why everyone should love science right now in the pandemic. But, the bottom line is you can't end corporate misdeeds, either for environmental harms or social harms, if you don't have good data. And to have good data, you need monitoring. And still to this day, despite all these promises, we have no monitoring mechanism.
So, Etelle, I wanted to talk to you about whistleblowing. We've seen it in the movies, but has that impacted your work, and how?
The crazy thing is, we've been contacted by whistleblowers from multiple companies who have given us really important information. I think often this happens when a company is so bad on environmental and social performance that its own employees feel ashamed. And so it's kind of a wake-up call for CEOs and procurement directors and the C-suite generally of big companies that, look, hey, your employees are not robots. They have hearts too. They have souls too. They can feel ashamed when you're trashing ancient rainforests. And if you push them far enough, if they realize that they are involved in aiding and abetting what might be a crime or ecocide, then people have consciences. They might very well speak out. So actually we've had, I would say, in the chocolate industry alone, something like 8 whistleblowers, but also, insiders from other companies and other spaces that have also come forward with information. But Andrew, even more important than the whistleblowers is sometimes having a corporate champion on the inside. Mm-hmm. Every now and then in a company, we'll find an interlocutor who just cares so much, and that person becomes almost your best ally to move a company along a sustainability journey and just fight like hell from the inside. So that's also a really beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm. And what if someone had some information that they wanted to share with you guys? What advice would you give a potential whistleblower?
I would just say, please give it. We're in a mass extinction. We're in the age of the Anthropocene. Climate chaos is not a hoax. It is real. It is coming soon to theaters near you if it hasn't already arrived in the form of cataclysmic wildfires and hurricanes. And every little thing that you do right now can count so much for later. Every company we change, every industry we change, every project of every company that we change. So if you have information that is material and important for an environmental campaign, please share it. The time is now. We need you.
And you've just sued Casino, the supermarket chain. Could you tell us a little bit more about that case and how that came about and what the impact's been from it?
Yeah, it's very exciting. It's one of my favorite things I've ever done in my whole professional career. With this lawyer who I believe is one of the top French environmental lawyers named Sébastien Mabille, and a coalition of French NGO partners, but also of indigenous associations from Brazil and Colombia. We filed our preliminary motion against a supermarket called Casino, which is essentially gambling with the planet and gambling with the lungs of the planet, because Casino is the biggest supermarket in Brazil. It's the biggest supermarket in Colombia. It's very big in France. And they source from meat packers like JBS, which is the biggest meat company in the world, which have a terrible track record of slavery, labor abuse, environmental harms like deforestation, illegal deforestation, indigenous land grabbing, all kinds of problems in the meat industry. And when a supermarket is selling meat to its customers, I believe that the people shopping in that store, they think that the meat is honest meat. Mm-hmm. It would never cross their mind that a supermarket would provide them with something that's tied to harms and sorrow and crimes. So I feel it's a really important thing to hold supermarkets accountable for their connection to corporate actors that are engaged in very dubious behavior. And in particular, Casino actually has problems in its supply chains, direct supply chain, that were documented by a French NGO. So I think the message is you can run, but you can't hide. Justice is coming, and it's coming to as many companies as we can go after.
And what laws in France were you able to sue Casino under?
It's a beautiful new law. It's called the Loi de Devoir de Vigilance, which translates as the Law of Duty of Vigilance. And it's this amazing, innovative new French law that now a lot of other countries are looking at. The EU is looking at it as a model. According to this law, if you reach a certain threshold of size, you must disclose all the social, environmental, and health harms in your supply chain. You must take steps to mitigate all those harms, and you have to disclose everything you're doing to mitigate those harms. So it's actually a law that is both pushing for traceability and transparency, but also for accountability and action.
That sounds amazing. And what's been the response from the rest of the industry? Obviously, people are watching what you guys are doing.
we've had an outpouring of responses. Yeah, many folks have called us up and written us, and I think it's triggering an awareness, a raised awareness, both inside the industry and among people watching the industry. So investors, bankers, shareholders, as well as, of course, NGOs and people in government and politics. But yeah, even inside the industry, we see that there's possibly ripple effects. Shortly after we did this, the world's biggest meat company, JBS, finally came through with a new policy, which doesn't go far enough, of course. It has a lot to be done still, but just the mere fact that JBS took a step was very encouraging.
And what's the advice that you would give a CEO of, for example, JBS and their shareholders?
I would say that you might think you're making money in the short run, but if you have kids, if you have grandkids, if there's anyone on this planet that you love is under the age of 30, what you're doing now is probably going to destroy their lives. And so actually, in the long run, we are all interconnected. Companies that are engaging in deforestation or driving and incentivizing deforestation are killing the lungs of our planet. They're dysregulating the rain cycle. They are pushing us towards climate chaos that will be irreversible and cataclysmic. And so, if you're not going to do it for love, the second message I have is supply chains won't do well with climate chaos hits. Climate chaos is not kind to agricultural commodities, right? You need rain, you need a more or less fixed temperature. You can't have giant fluctuations and changes that mean that pests will start sweeping through at a rate never seen before. So even if you really don't love anybody and you don't care about humanity, then at least care about your long-term bottom line. 10, 20 years from now, your company might go under because you will have created the conditions for cataclysmic change that you can't control and profit from.
That's really sound advice. Thank you, Etelle. And can I ask you, on a professional level or personal level, you must have had some highs and lows in your career. Could you tell us what those have been, please?
Yeah. I think a low in my career was when I was doing an investigation for Mighty Earth. I went undercover and we investigated deforestation for cocoa in the West. It was a couple years ago, and it was right around that time that there was an uprising of soldiers, many of whom formerly were rebels. And there were a number of carjackings and killings. The unrest kind of spiraled. I could tell something was wrong even when we pulled out of the park and we hit all these roadblocks with guys with ski masks and guns. And so it's quite disquieting. So I had to hunker down for a while, and I was pregnant at the time and lost the baby. So that was a very sad moment. Sad because, of course, I was going through this personal tragedy, but also sad because I think a lot of people had hoped that the Ivory Coast was moving towards real stability. And I was both watching with my own eyes the environmental destruction of this country that's really dire. They've lost 96% of their forests, I think. Also watching this political instability. And I think often political instability and environmental harms go hand in hand, because we all live in this planet. When the planet doesn't do well, we don't do well. And I was also going through this personal heartbreak, so that was a tough time. Mm-hmm. And maybe the high point of my whole career was when we sued Casino. I think that is a beautiful moment where lawmakers, civil society, indigenous leaders, a lot of great energy came together to hold one of the biggest and most powerful companies in the world accountable and to signal to the world's biggest meat company, you've got to change. And I feel like the message got heard. And so it felt so powerful, and also just being able to bring indigenous leaders into a role where they're able to hold someone accountable somehow. Their lands are being grabbed, their leaders are being attacked, people are being killed in Brazil at very high rates. So being able to give them this voice and this power, that felt amazing.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that you had such a kind of low in your career, but really thankful that you've continued on and doing what you do. So thank you. Can I ask, for someone that's looking for a career in conservation, what advice would you give them?
I would say that there's so many different ways to do conservation work. It doesn't have to be working as a park ranger, which is, I think, the first idea that pops into everybody's head. If you work in a company, you can become a champion on the inside for moving your company to carbon neutral or no deforestation or even forest positive. If you are working in banking, you can go into green finance. There's this whole new movement, and follow the money is an important slogan, right? So I think that green finance is incredibly powerful. If you work in public health, you can always help, I think, people doing research on the intertwined nature of public health crises and environmental crises. Like right now, we know that with COVID, people experience these respiratory harms. And if on top of that, they're exposed to the smoke from wildfires and PM 2.5 from the fires, whether it's in the Amazon or California, or these raging fires in Indonesia, I think in 2015, even before the pandemic, 100,000 people died in premature deaths just from the fires in Indonesia, mostly from palm oil and from pulp and paper. Anytime you work in public health, helping to bring to light these injustices, that's a powerful thing to do as well. When you're in academia, you can teach classes that involve some small thing on environmental aspects of whatever it is you teach. If you're a journalist, you can cover an environmental beat as well as whatever beat you've been given. I think all of us can do something. That's the beauty of it.
And do you have a book that's inspired you in your work that you'd recommend?
I do. It kind of changes. I go back and forth. I love Arundhati Roy. She's maybe my favorite all-around author, but I feel very inspired as well by Margaret Atwood's book, Oryx and Crake. I think that Margaret Atwood brings us so close to these kind of dystopian near future realities where things have gone very far down the wrong path, but it opens our eyes to how close we are to that wrong path. And I feel like she somehow embeds in this beautiful literature a clarion call to get the hell off that bad path and onto a better path as a society. So yeah, that's Oryx and Crake for me.
Also, I'll be sure to check that out as well. So I'm curious, Etelle, do you eat chocolate? And if you do, what brand do you eat?
I do. And I often tell people, you don't have to just totally quit chocolate simply because there's deforestation and child labor in some parts of the industry. You can vote with your wallet. Obviously, it's great to vote. Everybody should vote. Voting is important when you have political elections because your elected politicians make decisions about big laws that shape commodity agriculture and every other thing that's hurting our planet. But you can vote every single day with your wallet. So if you go and you buy chocolate that is bean to bar, it's kind of like farm to table, but bean to bar. That means it's traceable. If you buy chocolate that's certified organic, that means at a minimum it doesn't have pesticides that are hurting small children. If you buy cocoa that's fair trade certified, fair trade isn't so great for the environment, but it does have protections for human rights and labor. So if you look for those logos, that can make a difference. And even if the certification bodies are not perfect, I know Rainforest Alliance and Fairtrade are not perfect, and cocoa, just like FSC is not perfect, and paper and RSPO for palm oil. Every little bit counts. So when you look for the logos, you're just sending a signal to the whole market, hey, I'm willing to pay a couple cents more, and I'm looking for this product. I care. I'm a customer who cares about the environment. That changes how big companies think. It does. They do care about market share, so they want to know where the customers are going. So you can talk to them indirectly like that. It's like sending them a telegraph.
Brilliant. And do you have any final remarks, Etelle?
I do. I think that most people who might be your viewers have no idea how much power they have, because often we can be overwhelmed by disaster fatigue and a sense of doom and gloom that the world is getting so bad so fast, it's hard to know what to do. But my message is actually there's a lot of things you can do that make a big difference. We just alluded to one. Vote from the heart with your pocketbook. Vote with your pocketbook. Buy better stuff. Buy stuff that is made more ethically, more environmentally. That's like buying from the heart. The other thing is voting for elected officials who care about the environment, and also calling them, Facebooking them, tweeting them, whatever is easiest for you. Do you tweet? Do you Facebook? Do you email? Do you call? Do you want to go visit them? Anytime you talk to your elected official, it galvanizes them into action in a way that's really impressive. And the last thing is petitions. Sometimes people get a bit snarky and a bit disillusioned, and they say, what's the point? But actually, clicktivism works. Often I will try to get a company to change. Nothing. Then we get a petition with 100, 200,000 signatures. The next day, the company's like, we're so sorry we never answered you before. We'd love to talk. We're going to change our policies. Let's sit down and have a conversation about it. So, every little thing you do, voting, signing petitions, buying better stuff, educating yourself and your family and friends by watching documentaries and reading reports, all that stuff is so powerful. So I think it's a message of hope. Don't give up, lean in, stand up and speak out.
Amazing. And once again, Etelle, thank you so much for coming on to Earth Live and sharing your story. I'm sure it's going to inspire other people to take action themselves in some way, shape or form. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Cheers. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Kirsty. If you enjoyed the content today and would like to watch more videos like this, please subscribe to our social media channels or join us at www.f.live/join.